I've always believed that the people you build with are the people you die with. It's a romantic notion, sure, but when you've worked side by side with someone through thick and thin, you start thinking loyalty is just a given. I met Daniel Crow when I was 24 and working as a junior project engineer at a mid-sized construction firm in Newcastle. He was 30, already a site manager, already with that easy confidence of a man who knows he can handle himself in any room. Daniel wasn't the type to talk much about his past, but he had this way of listening, really listening, that made you feel like you mattered. We bonded quickly. Maybe it was because we both grew up without fathers around. Mine left when I was 6. His, according to the little he shared, died when he was 8. We'd knock off after a long day, grab a pint at the Black Swan, and swap stories about everything from football to the women we couldn't keep up with. Over the years, Daniel became more than a friend. He became my anchor. When my mother fell ill and I had to take unpaid leave to care for her, he quietly covered shifts for me. When I nearly lost my flat during the 2008 downturn, he lent me $3,000 without blinking. He refused to let me sign an IOU, just told me, "We're mates. That's enough." By 2015, we were both working for the same private contracting company, Ellis & Kerr. The industry had changed, more regulations, tighter budgets, less tolerance for mistakes, but Daniel thrived in it. And when an opportunity came up to bid for a huge housing development contract in York, Daniel asked me to join him as his second-in-command. It felt like the natural next step. We won the bid, 600 units, spread over 3 phases, all to be delivered within 4 years. It was the biggest job of my life. I remember walking the site with him on the first morning, frost still clinging to the dirt, steel frames glinting under the pale winter sun. Daniel clapped me on the back and said, "This is it, mate. We do this right, we'll never have to work for anyone else again." I didn't know then how literal that would become or how much those words would come to haunt me. The first year on the York project was brutal. 6 days a week on site, constant wrangling with suppliers, council inspectors breathing down our necks about every bloody fire escape and railing height. Daniel handled it like he was born for it, calm in meetings, ruthless when deadlines slipped, and always able to charm the right person over a whiskey at the pub. Me, I was learning, and he was teaching. There was one night in late March, after we'd finally met a crushing milestone, when we stayed back in the temporary site office, drinking cheap beer from paper cups. The rain hammered on the metal roof, and Daniel was staring at the plans with this little smirk. "You know," he said, "Ellis & Kerr are idiots." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the people who are paying us?" "Yeah. They're taking on too many projects at once. They've spread themselves thin. If this York job were ours, not theirs, we could pocket double what they're giving us." I laughed it off, thinking he was joking. But Daniel didn't laugh. "Think about it, mate," he pressed. "We know the suppliers. We've got the workforce. Ellis & Kerr are just the middlemen taking a cut." I shrugged it away. Had a few beers. Besides, starting our own outfit sounded like a dream that required more capital and risk than either of us could manage. Over the next few months, though, little things started catching my eye. Once, I noticed a shipment of bricks being signed off at a slightly inflated quantity compared to what was delivered. Daniel brushed it off. "Supplier mix-up. Happens all the time." Then there was a subcontractor who mentioned they'd been paid in cash for part of their work. That was odd. We usually paid strictly through bank transfers for the paper trail. Daniel waved it away again. Just easier for them this way. By the summer, it convinced myself I was overthinking things. We were ahead of schedule, on budget, and the bosses in Newcastle were thrilled. Daniel was right, we made a hell of a team. Then came the email. It was meant for Daniel, but it'd been CC'd by accident. It was from a solicitor in Leeds, detailing the final steps for registering the new company and requesting signatures from both Mr. Crow and Mr. Ashton. Ashton wasn't me. I didn't say anything at first. I told myself it could be some unrelated venture. But the name of the company, Crow and Ashton Developments, made my stomach knot. And the fact that Daniel had never mentioned it to me, that was the first time I felt something I couldn't shake. I started watching him differently after that. By early autumn, the air on site had that sharp bite that told you winter wasn't far. The houses were coming together, rows of brick and timber lined like soldiers waiting for inspection. On the surface, everything was smooth. We were still hitting targets, still keeping the council happy, still cashing our paychecks. But beneath that, something had shifted. Daniel was spending more time away from site. Sometimes he'd disappear for hours in the middle of the day, phone glued to his ear when he came back. If I asked, he'd shrug it off with a vague, supplier problem, or had to smooth something over with the planners. One Thursday, I overheard a conversation I wasn't supposed to. I'd come into the site office early to go through inspection reports. The door was ajar, and Daniel's voice carried in low and urgent tones. "No, keep Ashton happy for now. Once the papers are signed, he'll handle the rest. Trust me, he won't see it coming." There was a pause, then muffled laughter, not Daniel's, but a man's voice on the other end. I froze, heart thumping in my throat. Papers signed, and I wasn't supposed to see it coming. I waited until I heard the chair scrape back and the creak of the door on the far side of the office before I slipped away. That day, I worked like nothing had happened, but inside, I was shaking. That night, I dug into the Crow and Ashton lead. It didn't take long to find the company's house filing. Crow and Ashton Developments Limited had been registered 2 months ago. Daniel Crow was the sole director. The other Ashton was Gregory Ashton, a developer from Leeds with a shady reputation for undercutting contracts and muscling out smaller firms. It was all starting to line up. Ellis and Kerr were relying heavily on Daniel to keep York running smoothly. If Daniel and Gregory took the subcontractors, suppliers, and even the site staff with them, Ellis and Kerr would be crippled. And me? I was just a pawn, useful for now, disposable later. For days, I played my role, smiling in meetings, sharing pints after work, all the while cataloging every invoice, every delivery note, every odd transaction I could find. I didn't know yet if I wanted revenge or just self-preservation, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to be blindsided. The final push came in November. Daniel invited me to meet him at a pub in York, not our usual Black Swan, but a quieter place tucked away off the high street. He had that easy grin, pint in hand, and said, "I've got a proposal for you, mate. Something big." I didn't let on that I already knew. I leaned back, nodded. "Go on." He told me, plain as day, that he was leaving Ellis and Kerr, that he'd be starting fresh with Gregory Ashton, that there was a place for me if I signed on quickly, before the transition started. The word transition tasted like poison. I asked, "And Ellis and Kerr? What happens to them?" Daniel didn't even flinch. "They'll survive. Or they won't. Doesn't matter, it's business." That was when I realized something. The man I'd trusted for over a decade wasn't the man I thought he was. Maybe he never had been. I didn't give Daniel an answer that night. I told him I needed to think about it, which he seemed to take as a win. He clapped me on the shoulder, bought me another pint, and started talking about how much more we could make once we were free of Ellis and Kerr's dead weight. But in my head, gears were turning. The next morning, I called in sick. Instead of going to the site, I took the train to Newcastle and walked straight into Ellis and Kerr's head office. The receptionist looked startled to see me. I'd only been there twice before in my life. I asked to see David Kerr himself, the Kerr and Ellis and Kerr. I half expected to be told he was too busy, but within 10 minutes I was sitting in a leather chair across from his desk. I told him everything: the inflated invoices, the cash payments, the new company registered with Gregory Ashton, the conversations I'd overheard. At first, his expression was just still, like he was letting it all sink in. Then the anger showed: tight jaw, fists clenching on the desk. "You're sure about this?" he asked. "As sure as I am sitting here," I said. He nodded slowly. "Leave it with me. And, for your own sake, don't let Daniel suspect you've talked to me." I left the office with my stomach knotted. I'd just crossed a line. Back on site, the next few days were tense. Daniel was upbeat. He kept talking about big moves and the next chapter, like he was already mentally gone from Ellis and Kerr. I pretended to be interested, all the while wondering when the axe would fall. It didn't take long. The following Monday, 2 black cars pulled up to the site. Out stepped David Kerr and 2 men in tailored coats. They walked straight past me and into the temporary office where Daniel was holding a meeting with the foreman. I stayed outside, but I could hear the raised voices through the thin metal walls. "You think I wouldn't find out?" Kerr's voice thundered. "I don't know what you're—" Daniel started, but Kerr cut him off. "Save it. You've been siphoning our contracts to Ashton, setting up your own company on our time, with our resources. You're finished here, Crow." Silence. Then Daniel's voice, quieter, colder. "Who told you?" "Doesn't matter," Kerr said. "You've got 10 minutes to clear your things. And if you set foot on another one of our sites, you'll make sure you never work in this industry again." When Daniel finally emerged, his face was stone. He walked past me without a word, without even looking at me. His car was gone before I could move. I should have felt relieved. Instead, all I felt was hollow. A friendship I thought was unbreakable had shattered in the space of a week, and even though I'd been the one to expose him, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd lost something I'd never get back. The day after Daniel was removed from the site, everything felt wrong. Not because I missed him though, in some twisted way. I did, but because the air felt heavier, like the buildings themselves knew something had shifted. The foremen went about their jobs with an uneasy quiet. Nobody said Daniel's name out loud, but I could see the questions in their eyes when they looked at me. Some of them had worked with him for years. Others had joined the York job because of him. Now he was gone, and the gap he left was like an open wound. David Kerr didn't come back to the site. Instead, I got a terse phone call from him. From now on, you're running this build. You've got my trust, but don't make me regret it. I promised I wouldn't. But the truth was, I wasn't sure I wanted this anymore. That evening, I went to the Black Swan out of habit. The place was warm, the air thick with the smell of beer and frying chips. But when I sat at our usual table by the window, it felt wrong to be there alone. The seat across from me seemed to glare empty, accusatory. I remembered all the times Daniel had sat there, leaning back with that easy grin, telling me we could take on the world. I thought about the nights we'd walked home through the rain, talking about futures we didn't yet understand. And I hated myself for missing the man I thought he was. Later, as I walked home, I wondered if betrayal always felt like this, like being robbed twice. First of the trust you gave, and second of the memories you thought were safe. Over the next few weeks, I buried myself in work. If I kept moving, kept ticking boxes and signing off deliveries, maybe I wouldn't have to think too much. The York build stayed on schedule. Kerr was happy. The men kept their jobs. On paper, things were fine. But under the surface, I carried a knot in my chest. Every time I looked at a new hire, I wondered, can I trust you? Every handshake with a supplier felt like a question mark. Then, one cold Thursday morning in December, I saw him. Daniel? He was standing outside a cafe across from the train station, talking to a man in a dark overcoat. Gregory Ashton, if I wasn't mistaken. They looked serious, no smiles, no small talk. Daniel's hair was messier than I'd ever seen it, his coat a little frayed at the cuffs. For a moment, I almost crossed the street, almost demanded to know why I had done it. But what would I get? An excuse, a lie, or worse, the truth, stripped of anything that might make it easier to bear. Instead, I turned away and walked to the site. I told myself that seeing him was nothing, that it didn't matter anymore. But that night, I dreamed of the first day we met, and in the dream, I already knew how it would end. It happened on a night I hadn't planned for. Mid-February, the cold so sharp it cut through my gloves, it stopped by the Black Swan after a late inspection. The place was busier than usual Friday crowds, laughter spilling over the clink of glasses. I was halfway through my first pint when I saw him. Daniel? He was leaning against the bar, pint in hand, chatting with two men I didn't recognize. His hair was shorter now, his beard trimmed close, but I'd have known him anywhere. He didn't see me at first. I could have left, slipped out the back, told myself it wasn't worth it. But the thing about carrying betrayal in your chest is that it rots there if you don't cut it out. I set my glass down, walked over, and tapped him on the shoulder. He turned, and for the first time in all the years I'd known him, Daniel Crow looked surprised. Not angry, not smug, just caught off guard. Tom, he said, voice flat. Didn't expect to see you here. I could say the same, I replied. The two men at the bar made themselves scarce, melting into the crowd. Daniel took a slow sip from his pint, eyes locked on mine. You came to shout at me? He asked. No, I said. I came to hear it. From you? For a moment, the noise of the pub seemed to fade, the air between us thick. He looked down at his drink, then back at me. It wasn't personal, he said finally. It was business. Ashton had the money. Ellis and Kerr were a sinking ship. I saw an out, and I took it. You saw a way to get the people who trusted you, I shot back. You didn't just betray Kerr, you betrayed me. His jaw tightened. I gave you the chance to come with me. After you'd already cut the deal behind my back, I said. That's not an offer, that's a knife in the ribs, with a smile. For a second, I thought he might actually apologize. But instead, he shrugged. We all do what we have to do to survive. I didn't think you'd understand. You're right, I said, stepping closer. I don't understand. And I hope I never do. I left before he could answer. Outside, the air was freezing, my breath curling in front of me. But I felt lighter, like it set something down I'd been carrying too long. Still, part of me knew it wasn't over. Not really. 2 months passed after that night in the Black Swan. I didn't see Daniel around York again. Word on the site was that he and Ashton had taken on a big development in Leeds, a refurbished warehouse project turned luxury flats. At first, I didn't care. Let him have his new empire. Let him drown in the same games he played with me. I had enough on my plate keeping the York build on schedule. But bad news travels fast in this business. One rainy Tuesday morning, I was in the site office, signing off a delivery note, when one of our brickies Pete poked his head in. "You hear about Crow?" he asked. I shook my head. Pete grinned not kindly. Ashton's pulled the rug, left him holding debts the size of a bloody cathedral. Word is, half the suppliers on that Leeds job walked off site last week. Something about unpaid invoices. I kept my face still, though my pulse quickened. "Where'd you hear that?" "Mate of mine works for one of Ashton's crews. Says Crow's name is Mud now. Can't get a job anywhere within 50 miles. Banks won't touch him." After Pete left, I just sat there, staring at the rain streaking the window. I thought about the first time I'd seen Daniel confident, sharp, untouchable. And now, in my mind's eye, I saw him alone in some cheap flat, phone ringing with creditors, realizing that Ashton had used him the same way he'd used me. I wish I could say I felt satisfaction. I didn't. What I felt was something colder. Betrayal had a way of stripping a man down, not just the betrayer, but the betrayed, and seeing him fall didn't make me whole again. It just confirmed what I already knew. There was no going back to who we were before. That night, I walked the streets of York long after dark, past the site, past the cafes and pubs when haunted, until I found myself outside the train station. I thought about taking the next train to Leeds, finding him, saying something. I didn't know what, but I didn't buy a ticket. I just stood there in the rain until I was soaked through, then went home. It's been 5 years since that project in York, and the ghosts of those months still linger. I've moved on, changed companies, moved cities, even started a small consulting business. I still build things, but I don't trust as easily anymore. Sometimes, late at night, when the city is quiet and I'm alone with my thoughts, I think about Daniel, about the friend I lost, and the man he turned out to be. Betrayal leaves scars deeper than any wound you can see. It's not just about the act itself, it's about what it does to your soul. It reshapes how you see the world and the people in it. I've learned that trust isn't something you give lightly. It's earned, tested, and sometimes painfully ripped away. But it's also something you have to keep trying to give, if only to remind yourself that not everyone will break you. As for Daniel, I heard he disappeared shortly after Leeds collapsed. Some say he left the country. Others say he's working under a new name somewhere far from here. Maybe he's rebuilding too. Maybe he's haunted by what he did. I don't know. And part of me doesn't want to know. What I do know is this. Sometimes, the people you build with are not the people you die with. But you carry the lessons they leave behind, whether you want to or not. And that, in the end, is the only thing that stays.